Welcome to Plain Talk, where we are going to be talking with Senate Majority Leader David Houge. He recently had a letter to the editor of the forum, and I'm assuming probably sent to other publications as well. He co-authored it with House Majority Leader Mike LaFleur, and it's about the carbon capture, CO2 capture, how important it is for our state on multiple fronts. I mean, we're not just. I think a lot of people think about it in the context, carbon capture in the context of, the coal industry. And that's certainly an important application, but you got to realize, for instance, the Summit carbon pipeline, which has become kind of a flashpoint in this debate, really has nothing to do with the coal industry. In fact, it has nothing to do with the coal industry. It's about the ethanol industry, really. And also carbon capture on a lot of other fronts. It's good. It's for agriculture, for oil recovery. There's a lot of things going on. We wanted to talk with them about that, and also maybe some of the other. We just came through a primary. Lots of interesting things happen in legislative races. We'll talk about all sorts of stuff with Senator Hogue, along with, of course, my co-host, Chad Oban. Senator, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Pretty good. Let's start. Let's talk about something fun that nobody in the state can stop talking about right now. Do you think Doug Burgum's going to be the vice president or vice presidential candidate, the running mate?
Well, I'm listening to the words of one of Trump's closest advisor, who said, if anybody knows, they're not telling you the truth. The only person that does know is Donald Trump. So
that's no fun. That's not any fun at all, Senator. Come on.
I hope he is, but put it this way, I think it's fair to say he has a 1 in 3 chance. Is that
There's some really impressive hedging going on here. Yeah. It's really impressive.
I think maybe our listeners like to know that Senator Hogue is an attorney at his day job. So that's
well. I'll tell you what. If former President Trump had called me or does call me, I will urge him to select Doug Burgum.
So tell us about this letter. What occasion? What made you and your counterpart, your colleague in the House, Representative LaFleur, what occasioned this letter to the editor about carbon capture?
Well, really, it was a couple of events. I'm from the Bismarck area. I have roots and farm in the Bismarck area, and one of the things that really surprised me was, Bismarck, Mandan, the whole community had been through this pipeline debate involving the Dakota Access Pipeline 8 years ago. And as you know, we had paid protesters come in from out of state and made quite an event in the Bismarck, Mandan area. And of course, one of their central themes was pipelines are dangerous. They can't be trusted. If they break while they're, underneath the Missouri River, it would be an economic and environmental catastrophe, and we just can't have this pipeline. And I thought the people of the community and the state were, pretty skeptical of those claims. And of course, the pipeline was permitted. It's been moving almost 400,000 barrels of oil per day for almost 8 years now. And of course, it's still under a cloud of regulatory confusion, because there's still litigation going on as to whether or not that particular pipeline should be allowed to continue to operate underneath the Missouri River. And I just thought, man, can we really seriously have a discussion that these pipelines are unsafe and not advance our state's economic interest? And there seems to be a renewal of that in the Bismarck Mandan area. And I just thought, that is just, I think that's not good policy at all. I strong supporter of pipelines. I'm not a fluids engineer, but I know they're the safest, fastest, most economical way to move fluids and gases. And as a matter of policy, I think we need to get behind them. And when somebody wants to spend billions of dollars to build a pipeline in this state and move a product CO2 that has multiple uses, both in the state of North Dakota and outside, I think we need to support that and stand up and say this is good for North Dakota.
So, Senator, I just one quick follow up. Do you feel like there's hypocrisy then, like from some? Because when I look at the people who opposed DAPL versus the people who are opposing the Summit pipeline, those are two pretty distinct political constituencies. I mean, I think the DAPL folks would probably be more leftist, and it's certainly centered on the Native American community, Standing Rock. Whereas the Summit pipeline, I would say is more right wing. So, I mean, is there? And those seemed flipped with the DAPL situation. So, is there hypocrisy going on?
Well, I would say with the Summit pipeline, there's more opposition. There's opposition from the left and the right.
Yeah, that's true.
Because with the Summit, I mean, the same people who oppose DAPL oppose Summit because, they want to shut down the fossil fuel industry. And if they perceive, of course, that piping CO2 in from Iowa and Minnesota and South Dakota will further advance production of oil and natural gas, they're going to oppose that. And they've done so. I mean, they've been outspoken critics of it as well. But yeah, I think you're right in the sense that the Summit pipeline has also attracted opposition from the right. And again, their main 2 points have been that, this is a dangerous pipeline and that there's undue infringement on private property rights. And while I respect the argument about undue infringement on property rights, the idea that the pipeline is dangerous, I reject that.
Well, listen, as somebody who lives in Bismarck, I think the hypocrisy is strong. I mean, at least the folks on the left are consistent that they're against this thing. The people on the right who are against this pipeline were just fine with the pipeline going through Native American communities. And basically we're saying, I mean, there's the former mayor in Bismarck who's against this pipeline.
Well, and just to be clear, DAPL didn't go through a Native American community. It skirted the upper edge of the Standing Rock Reservation across the river.
That does not change the hypocrisy.
No.
That it's going through poor areas and people in Bismarck, including the former mayor, didn't say anything. But now that it's going through their backyard, all of a sudden they're scared about it. I mean, it is rank hypocrisy from the folks on the right. So my question for you, Senator Hogue, is I'm a big proponent of CO2 capture. I think that if we want to meet our environmental goals and keep the industry strong, this has to be part of the mix. I think the right and the left need to figure this out. But have the legislature, the governor, others sort of failed at sort of making the case to the public? Because I think you're right. There is more opposition this time than there was in the past. I also believe that pipelines are safe. I mean, we just saw a derailment again out in eastern North Dakota. I think pipelines are the safest way to do it. But has there been a failure somewhere in communication, a failure in sort of getting people to understand that this is the safest way to transport this stuff? Where did we go wrong?
Yeah, that's a great point, Chad, that I totally agree on. And that was another reason for that letter to the editor. I think the silent majority that understand the societal value of pipelines have not been outspoken enough. They've just sort of sat back. And I've been critical of both the folks who want to build the pipelines and the folks that want to store the CO2. Is you need to get out and talk more about the overall benefits of both the sequestration of CO2 and its potential future use as enhanced oil recovery. They just I don't know, they just haven't done it. And so I totally agree. Yeah, I think there needs to be a greater discussion. And we've actually had those conversations with not only the folks that want to build the pipeline, but, EERC, who's been, I wasn't aware of this until I spent some time up there recently, but the technology to capture and store CO2 is 70 years old. It's not a recent phenomenon. I mean, the pipeline, the CO2 pipeline that goes up into Weyburn, Saskatchewan, is 23 years old.
Yeah, that's been operating in North Dakota for some time, from the Dakota gasification plant, and then pushing that carbon up into Canada. Summit kind of came in, and because it's really hard, because it's in our part of the world, the Summit carbon pipeline has become sort of this avatar for carbon capture and sequestration in general. And I think that's a little unfair, because it's a specific project with a specific company behind it. And it's not a lot of the complaints, if we're talking about like where, to Chad's question, where things went wrong, I guess I perceived it as Summit made some mistakes, certainly early on, where they came in, they had some very aggressive people coming onto land. They weren't asking permission. A lot of landowners felt slighted. They felt like there were some high-pressure tactics put in play. Now, I wasn't there for any of that, so I don't know, but enough people are saying that. I mean, do you feel like Summit could have done a better job when they came in how they handled their approach to North Dakota?
I think that's a fair criticism, Rob. I will tell you, I've seen enough of their proposals. They lowballed some landowners. And so that was part of the problem. Another problem was, we've got a statute that's recently been upheld by our Supreme Court that says you can come on a person's land and survey it for the purposes of determining whether it's an appropriate location for the pipeline without landowner permission. And that certainly got a number of people worked up. And when they didn't grant permission to survey, of course, Summit turned around and sued. So I thought that was a misstep as well. But I think, as you've seen from their numbers, they're starting to see increased voluntary easements, and they've refined their easement as well. And so they're gaining greater acceptance. And if I would, I'll agree with your general assessment that they made some initial mistakes, but I'd also say they've corrected a lot of it, specifically in terms of just increasing the offers to make it more attractive to the landowners.
And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but the Industrial Commission put forward, was it $300,000 for sort of a marketing to help sort of sell the pipeline to the public? Is that a proper use of taxpayer dollars? I mean, to me, again, it seems like this private company should be able to get people on board without the taxpayers having to fit some of the bill to sell. What do you guys think about that? Or what, Senator Hogue? I suppose, Rob, I don't care about your opinion.
Well, I care about Rob's opinion.
He'd rather I answer that question, I think.
Yeah. Isn't a proper use of taxpayer dollars to sort of sell this thing on behalf of private companies who obviously will pay taxes moving forward, but they're probably going to turn a little bit of a profit once this thing's in the ground?
Well, I think, Chad, your question is a little bit unfair. I think you're linking those dollars to the Summit pipeline, but our intent is to educate the public about the benefits of CO2 generally, and that goes beyond one pipeline, one project. I'll refer you to the potential partnership between that pipeline and Minot. Minot is permitted to store CO2 as well, and frankly, they would like, I think, a partner like Summit to sort of de-risk part of their large project. They refer to it as Project Tundra. And these projects are massive, and we're talking billion-dollar projects. So I think it's fair for the state to want to spend money to educate the public about CO2, because as our letter to the editor said, I mean, one of the potentials is, of course, a significant increase in the production of oil and gas and the life of the Bakken as well. So it's not just about the Summit pipeline, although I'd grant you that it's a significant component of the educational effort.
I guess to that point, and I mean, I made the point that maybe it's at times fair to view the Summit project as the be-all and end-all of carbon capture in North Dakota, which it's not. But on the other hand, it is kind of a proof of concept, right? I mean, we want. Yep. I mean, having a successful project operating in not just North Dakota. I mean, it would be gathering carbon from across the upper Midwest and then bringing it to North Dakota for sequestration. Having that proof of concept in place is a stepping stone towards additional carbon capture projects. Like other investors can look at it and say, oh, this works. Other regulators can work at it and say, much the same way we look at our existing carbon pipeline and say, look, this one's working. This one's safe. Why not this one? I guess it's a stepping stone. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I see, there were stepping stones before this pipeline. I mean, you look at Red Trail out in Richardson, right? Ethanol plant sitting out not in the Corn Belt, in western North Dakota. And because of, the work of the Department of Mineral Resources and Environmental Quality, now North Dakota can permit these, what they call Class 6 wells, so that they can inject CO2 in the ground. And I think that's a stepping stone. The ethanol plants around the state are going to look at Richardson and Red Trail and say, wow, let's see how has that improved their economic outlook and their viability as an ethanol plant. And so, you got Blue Flint that's storing their CO2 right in their own footprint. And so you've got, of course, the one in Castleton is going to use the Summit pipeline, but there are many other point sources of CO2 emissions that can look around and say, hey, since North Dakota can permit our well, maybe we should start looking at it and getting the added value for our ethanol or other main products and getting the credits.
I'm going to shift gears slightly, Rob, unless you have another question on this topic. So we're talking about Summit Pipeline. I'm going to talk about another easy subject, property taxes. Obviously, there's a ballot measure that we think is going to be on the ballot in November. I want your opinion on that. And assuming it's on the ballot and it fails, are you confident that the North Dakota legislature is going to maybe take a bigger lift on property taxes this session than they have on previous sessions? So first question, do you support the initiated measure? Second question, what's the legislature going to do about property taxes moving forward?
Okay, well, thank you. I oppose the measure. As I've told a number of groups, I think it's sort of, it takes a sledgehammer to a problem that really doesn't require a sledgehammer and maybe a rubber mallet. But to answer your second question, yes, I am confident that we will move to address property tax reform and relief, particularly for private homeowners and low-income private homeowners. The problem with the measure is not that it doesn't try to address a serious subject, as you point out, property taxes, but that it totally eliminates property taxes on behalf of commercial properties, centrally assessed properties like pipelines, railroads, airlines, publicly traded companies with utilities that cross multiple county jurisdictions. And so that's the problem with it. It requires that the legislature come up with $2.67 billion, and that will create its own set of problems for the state of North Dakota.
Senator, can you one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is we have a lot of entities that pay they pay a tax that's in lieu of the property tax because things specific to their industry or whatever, it makes levying a property tax difficult. So we basically set up an alternative way for them to generate revenues for local governments. Because I think a lot of times we just say, well, if we eliminate the property tax, then I'm not going to get a tax bill on my home anymore or my business anymore. But what about these industries paying in lieu of taxes? And I'm thinking like a lot of like the electrical co-ops or things like that. That's going to be, I'm thinking of like how we're going to unwind that mess, because why should they keep paying the in lieu of tax if the tax that it's in lieu of is gone? How do we unwind that? How do we unwind that?
Well, that's another discussion we've been having. That's a great question. As I look at the statute, the in lieu of, I don't think there's any legal basis to say one of these taxes is imposed in lieu of property taxes. I'll give you an example. Probably the biggest one is in our gross production tax, which is 5% of the oil and gas revenues. We send back $512 million to political subs and say, hey, here's $512 million for the biennium. You take this in lieu of assessing, wellheads, well pads, battery tanks, pipelines in your county. And so we've told them this is a substitute for what you could otherwise impose. But the gross production tax is not imposed on the basis of property that you own. It's imposed on the basis of oil that you produce and the value of that oil. So I don't perceive that to be a problem. And when I started looking into this, like the centrally assessed, we call them centrally assessed properties. The publicly owned utilities are taxed a little bit different than some of our co-ops, like and this is getting down into the weeds, but the telephone co-ops are taxed based on a measure of their income, not how much fiber they have in the ground and copper. So it's a very complex area, and it's just another piece of complexity that this constitutional measure will add to the issues that need to be addressed if it does pass.
How likely? Well, one thing when I read the measure that's on the ballot, the thing that it eliminates is it's very specific. It's the tax on the value of real property.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
So would it be possible if we pass this measure that local entities could just say, well, okay, we're gonna tax the square footage of your home then? So they're not taxing the value anymore; they're taxing the size, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, we could still essentially have a property tax. We're just taxing the property in a different way. I mean, is that a real possibility if this passes?
Well, did you sit in on our meeting? You guys are talking about all the questions we've been talking about in the past couple weeks. It's a possibility, Rob, but I don't think it's realistic. And here's why. If the people of North Dakota pass this constitutional measure, I guess it's my feeling and a lot of people's feelings they think the local tax is too much. And so if constitutionally we have to send $2.67 billion back to the political subs, I predict there will be significant support for curbing what the political subdivisions could otherwise do to add more taxes on top of the property taxes that we're already replacing. I think there's significant support, at least in the Senate, for, if the measure passes, to cap what other revenues political subdivisions could otherwise raise and tie it to what some other states have done, is tie it to like a consumer price index, an inflation index, so that the rate of local government growth is tied to inflation.
Senator Hogue, you said if the measure passes, you do that. How about if the measure doesn't pass? Would you still look at something like that to cap cities and counties? And a follow-up question to that is, you've been in the legislature since, I think, 2009, 2011, something like that. The issue around property taxes has gotten, people are more frustrated by it. So I've heard some of the proponents of this thing say, why should we believe the legislature when they say they're going to do something now? How would you respond to that? I mean, if people are more angry about property taxes, they don't feel like enough has been done. Why should they believe you now?
Well, I can only speak from my personal experience, Chad. I served on finance and tax in my first two sessions. My mentor was Senator Dwight Cook. And we genuinely believed back then when we had the revenues that if we a number of things we tried, that if we just bought down the school mill levies, for example, that would solve this problem. And of course the taxes, of course, continued to go up at a rate slightly above inflation, but not significantly above inflation. And then we came up with all kinds of mechanisms. I remember, I think my next session, we had this, this transparency. We required it on the tax statement, so the people could see the tax relief that they're being provided, and required that the political subs have a public hearing if they were going to raise taxes above a certain percentage. And honestly, I don't think any of those things have been as successful as we would have liked. So now I do think as I said, there is strong support for caps. And part of that is we've tried other things that haven't necessarily worked. Other states have imposed caps successfully. So I think we're there. But I did want to give you one factoid, and I was just talking about it last night. The rate that your taxes have been going up in the past 4 years is like 4.3% per year. And you think, well, geez, they've been gone up more than that, because that's barely above the rate of inflation for those 4 years. But 4.3% is the rate of increase over all classes of property. And I just think we need to, realize that, yes, valuations have been going up, and mill levies, maybe they've been relatively constant, but the overall tax liability has not gone way above what the rate of inflation is. And as I've explained a couple times, one of the problems with property taxes is you get one bill at the end of the year and you see that and you see the increase. But I bet you there are not very many people in the North Dakota that track all the sales tax that they're paying every time they make a purchase, and track what their sales tax has gone up at the end of the year. Because if they did, they would be shocked. They would be shocked to see that.
I actually wrote a column about that, like the increase in sales taxes, because the tax commissioner's office produces a quarterly report of all the sales tax changes in the state. I went back the last, I think it was like 2 decades. And the point I was trying to make at the time was, because I think it was in the context of like the Fargo Dome vote, and they wanted to add sales tax, and it was a temporary sales tax. And my point was, those temporary sales tax increases never go away. Nobody. I mean, if they do go away, it's like temporary, and then they reinstate them. But the degree, because I think locals are allowed up to a 3% sales tax on top of the state tax. I think is that the cap? I'm forgetting.
There's a cap. I don't think it's 3%. I think it's probably 2%. But I actually have an email on that. I can dig that out.
Well, anyway, whatever the cap is, I mean, there's a lot of communities that are at the cap, because I was also thinking about it in the context of, if we eliminate property taxes, could they go to the sales tax? But there's a lot of communities, and particularly in our commerce centers, Fargo, Minot, Bismarck, Grand Forks, that are already at their cap or very, very near it. So the idea that they could just shift it to a sales tax, that ain't going to happen.
Well, and the sales tax doesn't work for a rural community either, right? I mean, when you're talking about Ray, North Dakota, trying to pay for their schools, and it's a bar to Cenex.
They don't have the commerce to do it.
Right. And again, going back to the earlier point that we've discussed is, why would we want, if the objective of the measure is to end property taxes and the growth of the larger growth of local government, why would we as a policy matter say, okay, you get all of your property tax revenue that you had before, and now you can go out and raise additional revenues on top of what you're getting? That, from a policy perspective, that makes no sense to me.
Do you think there is a problem? And understanding when we're talking about local government, we're talking about a lot of different jurisdictions. I mean, county, city, park board, school board, and also depending on where you live. I mean, some parts of our state have probably done a better job than others. Do you think there is a problem though with growth in local government? Do you think they've grown too fast?
Well, boy, that's a complex question. I mean, it totally depends, Rob, on the political sub that you're talking about. You look at like some of these school districts out like West Fargo or Williston, their growth is not due to anything that they're
People are just moving there.
People are just moving there. Horace, I don't know if you've been to Horace recently, but my goodness, I think that's probably the fastest growing community in the state. So there's explosive growth out there. And if the legislature were to impose any type of a cap, I mean, I believe there has to be some sort of safety valve or outlet for these rapidly expanding school districts and communities to have some flexibility, whether it's in a fund that the state has or whether it's some relief from a cap. But I think that's got to be part of the policy.
But like, population growth, you wouldn't. I mean, because you would think if people are moving in, then your tax base is expanding too, which shouldn't automatically result in tax increases, though. Like, there should be more people paying and generating more revenue.
Well, it does, because those people that move in, though, Rob, they don't generate revenue for a while, and so a political subdivision some of them will bear the expense of that rapidly expanding school growth right away, because the students are coming into the classrooms, and that's when they, obviously that's when they have the expense, but they don't have the revenue to match it.
So you've mentioned several times $2.6 billion a biennium, $1.3+ billion a year. This thing passes, the legislature comes back in January. Are you guys going to be able to do anything beyond just trying to figure out how to unravel all the public I think about the K through 12 funding formula. It's so based on property taxes. You'd have to redo that whole thing, while at the same time trying to find $2.6 billion, which I hope listeners understand, that's a lot of money. Our budget's been growing some, but I think it's 40% of the general fund or something ridiculous like that. What happens? Like, how do you you're the majority leader of the Senate. How do you even start a session where you have to magically come up with $2.6 billion to fund emergency services in schools and, the priorities?
Yeah, well, I swear you guys must have listened to our meeting last night, because I guess one of the points I tried to make was, the governor has said, I'm preparing two different budgets based on whether Trump or Biden gets elected. And I said, we're going to be preparing two different budgets based on whether or not this measure passes. And it's going to be, I will say it's going to be a real challenge, because my thought would be that, we're going to direct the appropriations folks. We're going to have to give them a number, and this is what you have to cut from budgets. And we're going to have to give the finance and tax people a number, and this is how much you have to raise in additional revenue. Because it's as I've tried to explain, $2.67 billion is a lot of money, like you said, and you can't reasonably expect to do it with budget cuts. You can't reasonably expect to do it with tax increases. And you can't reasonably expect to do it all with, going to our rainy day funds and just say, all right, we'll take it out of the rainy day fund. It's going to be a combination, and that's where things are going to get challenging.
Well, David, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I wanted to get your opinions on the state fair lineup, but I guess we don't have time for that either.
Yeah, well, I'm so sorry. To be honest with you, I don't even know who's playing at the state fair. This is
neither do I.
Terrible.
Well, you got Lil Wayne, MGK, Motley Crue.
Okay, you named one act that I recognize so far.
I want to see Senator Hogue front row of Lil Wayne, getting his groove on.
I'm going to miss the whole thing, man.
Have you ever contemplated getting a facial tattoo like Lil Wayne?
No, I haven't.
No, you haven't. Yeah, probably for good reason. All right. I don't know if you could pull it off. I certainly know that I couldn't pull it off. All right.
Which is more of a neck tattoo kind of thing, not a face tattoo.
It is weird, like how tattoos have evolved in our society. Because once upon a time, you met a guy with a neck tattoo in a dark alley, you were getting mugged. Now there's a good chance that guy's going to invite you to his vegetarian knitting collective. So what a time to be alive. All right, we're gotten silly enough. We're gonna end it there. Thank you, Senator.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Just finished up with Senator Hogue and hedging his bets on whether or not Doug Burgum's going to be picked as VP. I was telling last night I had dinner with some people and they were, of course, asked me, do you think Doug Burgum's... that's the question every conversation these days starts out with. Do you think Doug is going to be picked VP? And I tell people, like, my mind changes hour to hour on it. In this moment, as we're recording this, yes, I feel like he's going to be chosen the VP. But you asked me again.
Wow, and just last night you told me no.
Yeah, I know. I'm all over the map on this. I don't know.
So interesting. Last week I was with people from all over the country, and people are asking me, so do you think Burgum's going to be the guy? And I said, absolutely, I think he's going to be the guy. And then I came back completely done a 180. I think it's J.D. Vance. I think it's J.D. Vance is going to.
No, but Senator Hogue's point where he was quoting somebody from Trump's orbit, and I've seen that quote in multiple, but nobody knows but Trump. And I guess we'll find out. So that's going to be interesting. Joe Biden, I think, last time we talked, there was an open question about whether or not he was going to continue to be the candidate. I think that question has been answered. He's the candidate. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, the only sort of pause, tomorrow's a big day. I mean, he's doing a live press conference tomorrow. If he has another hiccup, yesterday he gave the speech at NATO. He was strong, but again, that was with the teleprompter and all those different things. It was at the right time of day. If tomorrow at the live press conference he has another hiccup, I think we're going to see more calls for him to leave. I think I expected more, frankly, on Monday morning of more members of Congress coming out. I think the number's only like 7 at this point. Although I saw Michael Bennet, he's a senator from Colorado, really thoughtful, moderate guy last night, basically went on CNN and said, Biden can't win. I don't know if that he went as far as saying that Biden can't win and he's going to cost Democrats the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. And that's sort of where I'm at this point, that I think that would I like to see Biden get out? Probably. But just from a political calculus, if you don't want Donald Trump to be president, you can't stay in if you're Joe Biden.
So I wrote my print column this morning, Wednesday, July 10th, and I put it in the date because, again, a lot of people listen to these podcasts. I'm trying to be mindful of the fact that when you're listening to this is probably days and days after, or potentially days and days after we published it. But as you might imagine, being an apostate in the Republican Party who is not keen on Donald Trump at all, I talk to a lot of Republicans who feel that same way, who express that with varying degrees of sincerity in the in public. A lot of them are closeted, and publicly they support Trump. Privately, they don't like him at all.
Profiles of courage from those folks. Profiles in courage.
Yeah. Well, don't get me started. But a lot of them, there's been a tone shifting. A lot of them were saying either they weren't going to vote or they're going to hold their nose and vote for Joe Biden. That has shifted. And granted, this is all anecdotal. This is both, but I talked to a lot of people, and there's been a definite shift. And one of the things I keep hearing is they lied to us. Democrats lied to us. They knew what was going on with this guy, and they misrepresented it. And I'm not endorsing this point of view, but they're saying, how is that any different than Donald Trump lying about the 2020 election? And
I think your column makes some level of sense. I think we're using the term Democrat too broadly. I'm a Democrat, and I don't see Joe Biden every day. right? So it's not the Democrats lied to us.
Well, I think when they said they lied to us, I think they mean the people, like the Biden administration, the people who are around him who are working.
Rob, there's some Democrats who feel the exact same way.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's fair.
Those who have donated money, those who have, gone to work, gone to bat for this guy,
Yes.
over and over and over. With that all being said, we don't know for sure that it was just like a really, really terrible night. Again, that's why I think tomorrow, July 11th, the press conference, the live press conference is going to be so important. You and I have talked a lot about this, and they haven't done it yet because I'm not sure he's capable. He needs to be in front of the public every single day without a teleprompter, talking to voters. The fact that they haven't been doing that leads me to believe that this is a bigger problem than those around Joe Biden want us to believe.
And I think it's tough because even in moments where he might be mentally on and capable, like for instance, I don't know, they take him to a diner or something and he's shaking hands and kissing babies. He still looks frail, when he walks, like he kind of shambles. And I'm not trying to be insulting. He looks like he looks his age.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw the reports that they had a doctor come in, and one of the reasons that a doctor come in was because of the stiffness of his gait, because they were concerned about what that meant. And then there's rumors of Parkinson's.
Well, we had that whole blow up where we have confirmed where there's a Parkinson's doctor who's been visiting the White House with regularity, you saw the White House press corps, and not like fringe reporters. You're talking about people from like ABC News and stuff who are irate with the Biden administration, saying you are not being forthcoming with health data at a time where these questions are pertinent. So it
all makes me sort of sad. I mean, most people listening to this probably don't agree with this, but I truly believe Joe Biden is a very, very good man, and I adore his public service. And I'm devastated and sad that this is going to be his legacy.
I think that there are people that you can look to and admire their history of public service, while also acknowledging that there was some hubris and just hanging on too long.
Right.
You hung around too long. You should have called it. What's that Batman quote? You either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. I'm going to give you
nothing. I'm going to give you nothing on Batman quotes. I'm going to be of no help here at all.
Okay. That is the quote from the Batman movies. But and I'm not implying that Joe Biden's become a villain per se. I just think he should have kept to his promise when he ran in 2020 that he was going to be a bridge to something else.
Does he become a villain if he sticks in this race and Donald Trump gets elected and God knows what happens for the next 4 years?
Yeah, I think he does. I think it's really hard. I mean, and again, another thing that I'm hearing from my anti-Trump Republican friends is Democrats have been telling us, and a lot of people, like I agree, and a lot of my anti-Trump friends agree, which is why they're anti-Trump, that Trump is a real threat to the Republic. I mean, the thing is when you talk to Trump supporters about the things he says about dictatorship and some of his more authoritarian impulses and everything, it's like we're supposed to dismiss all that and not believe any of it because it's just rhetoric. It's just things he's saying to fire up the base. I don't want to rely on his forbearance, right? Yeah. I'm gonna take the things he says seriously. So Democrats have been telling us that this election is about the future of the American Republic. It's about defending democracy. And if that's true, then why are you running this guy?
But at this point in the game, again, I think there's only one person who can make this decision.
It's Joe Biden.
It's Joe Biden. Yeah. And so, why are you running this guy? Was a good question a year ago that I probably would have said because he's the only one who's ever beaten Donald Trump. That was a mistake. And that was a mistake that Democrats across the board and that nobody except for the strange little congressman from Minnesota, Dean Phillips, ran against Biden. It was a mistake.
I mean, the idea of Biden's kind of pushback when he called into Morning Joe, was it last week?
By the way, how Trump was that move to call into your favorite? Yeah.
Yeah. He called in and he kind of railed against the elites who were trying to push him out of the party, and then was like Like he's trying to make it sound like there's this small group of elite people who want him out. When you look at the polling, most Democrats, even if they say they're going to vote for him, I mean, there are majorities that are saying he shouldn't be running again. And really, it was like that before the debate, and it's gotten worse.
Yeah, and I talked to a lot of people who support Joe Biden. Some of them may consider themselves elite, but not most of them. It's universal, right? Most people are very concerned about what this looks like. Now, I do think there's been a bit of a shift today in or this week in sort of rank and file Democrats saying, well, if he's staying in, the alternative is Trump, right? I mean, so I think, I think in the next week or two, Democrats are going to have to figure out, you can't continue saying our guy sucks and he has to get out of here. At some point, they've got to circle the wagons and move forward.
Well, I think the wagons are being. So I think the moment's passed. I don't. At this point, I think he's not getting out. I think the moment's passed. I think you're starting to see them circle the wagons, and I don't think that's a sign that their concerns have been addressed at all. Right. I think it's I think it's a sign as if he's not leaving, the only thing we're going to do by continuing to complain about him is helping Trump, and we don't want to help Trump. And so I think it's going to disappear. And they're going to unite about Biden, but the concerns haven't gone away, and rightfully so. Biden's really done nothing to address them. And maybe he will. I mean, maybe this press conference will go really well. Maybe he'll have more events down the road that'll go really well. I just doubt it. I don't think he's...
tell you, I listened to the speech at NATO yesterday on the radio, and then listened to the analysis afterwards. He was strong yesterday, but the analysis was still nitpicking, like little things he did wrong. This is what we're going to be looking at for the next 4 months, is every time Joe Biden goes public, Democrats hold their breath. I mean, that's a tough way to, and people are going to nitpick. And here's the thing. I mean, Donald Trump had a rally last night where he was just spewing gibberish where you couldn't even track what he was saying. Yeah. And he's still getting a pass, right? I mean, there are two different standards for saying crazy stuff. And unfortunately it doesn't work well for Joe Biden.
Well, that's kind of what Donald Trump, what the Trump approach has bought himself. And again, I'm not endorsing this, and I'm not happy about it. And I feel like I write and talk about the crazy, stupid, awful things that Donald Trump does all the time, and been critical of Republicans for making their peace with it. But all that being said, I mean, Trump's kind of like, well, it's just Trump being Trump. Well, right. He doesn't really mean it. Like even his supporters, like that's just rhetoric. That's just whatever. Mean tweets. That's he's inoculated against it now.
Yep. But then you also have people trying to be his VP who go on cable news and say Joe Biden is a dictator and say all these other things. And then when you question people around those potential vice president's candidates, it's just a campaign.
Yeah.
This is the kind. I mean, I think using the word dictator about the U.S. president probably should be off limits, but unless they are a dictator, which Joe Biden is not.
No, he's not. We don't live in a dictatorship. And I could sit down and tell you, like, give you a list of all the policies that Joe Biden has implemented that I don't like. I don't think he's a good president, but that's all he is. He's just, and from my perspective, I know that's not your perspective, but from my perspective, he's just a bad president. That's it.
From a policy perspective, I think Joe Biden has accomplished more than any president in my lifetime of things that I like. Maybe that makes him a dictator.
I would have thought that Barack Obama would be the one who'd have that for you.
So I think Barack Obama, like the healthcare thing was, so here's the deal. Barack Obama is my guy, right? I mean, there's nobody, I'm not waving a flag.
Chad's in love with whatever Democratic president is in office at the moment. That's what we're hearing.
What's that?
You're in love with whatever Democratic president is in the office.
Yeah, but Barack Obama was special. But I think from a policy perspective, I think Joe Biden has got done quite a bit on student loans, on climate, on a variety of things. Yeah. Bipartisan infrastructure bill. I don't know if you remember when he accomplished that, along with the support of John Hogue.
In fact, I remember Kevin Kramer voted for it. I remember a Biden administration official coming here, and you even had Lori Hims, the very anti-Biden Republican National Committee woman, who also works for a television, they do like local cable access programming that's all hate Biden all the time, but they sure bellied up to the bar when Biden official came to the state, was ladling out cash. So,
and Mayor Pete was up in Grand Forks talking about the train bridge that's getting built up there.
I don't know. We can have a debate about the relative. I mean, the thing is like, you're allowed to think that Joe Biden is not a very good president without thinking he's a dictator.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Like, you and I can sit down and have a reasonable conversation about the merits of the Biden presidency without saying, well, he's a dictator, he's a tyrant, he's terrible. Like, if that's, I'm tired of that being the place we always have to go with the other side. And obviously the left did it too. I mean,
Oh, for sure. And I'm actually just thinking about myself and my perspective on these kind of things as a 48-year-old now versus when I was 22 or 23, and the things that I probably said about both Bushes, who now I kind of like, just the perspective on that as you get a little older.
It is. Hey, but the thing is, it's like we've become an entire nation of hot-blooded 22-year-olds.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing.
Right.
We need, I don't know. I don't know. It's very, very frustrating. So let me, go ahead.
You go.
Okay, let me ask you this question. Does Joe Biden sticking to his guns, does that help or hurt Doug Burgum possibly being picked as vice president, or does it matter at all?
So I think it probably doesn't matter at all if Joe Biden stays in. I think if Joe Biden would have got out and Kamala Harris ended up being the nominee, I think it would have hurt Doug Burgum. I think you would have been more likely to see somebody like a Tim Scott come up, or J.D. Vance, somebody who's sort of younger and has maybe a little bit more energy to balance that. I also think if Kamala would end up being the nominee, she'd probably pick a middle-aged white guy, sort of a boring VP candidate to balance things out. But no, I think if he stays in, it's probably neutral for Burgum to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Because Burgum's not as young as people think he is, right? I mean, he's
68.
68, which is far different from 81. But yeah, I mean, my question for you is, what changed between last night and this morning in terms of you feeling the Burgum momentum?
I think a lot of it's just, as you read the headlines and stuff, and again, I mean, it's like hour to hour for me, so I don't even know that anything. I talk myself in circles, like I make arguments in my head, and then I rebut those arguments, and then I convince myself the other way. It's just a hard thing to handicap because it has a very erratic person making what is already a difficult decision, given how personal it is. As somebody I was talking to last night made a really good point about how, presidents have like everything, or even like presidential candidates, their whole life is public. And so much of it is directed by, they have to be here, they have to do this, picking a running mate is like one of the few, it's one of the few things they have like absolute control over. And it becomes a very personal thing. And so I think even with a normal candidate, I think it'd be a difficult thing to handicap. And now you have a very erratic person. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, he could choose Kristi Noem, and it still wouldn't surprise me. Because it's just, who knows? I mean, he could do Kristi Noem just to own the libs, right? Like everybody hates her now, so he's gonna pluck her out and just be like, ha ha, look at this.
Couldn't you see like that sort of Sarah Palin sort of situation where it's just like, who is this person?
Right.
That he's just picking somebody. So here's where I'm at. I think it's not Burgum because I read one article that said the two finalists are JD and Marco Rubio. I don't think it's going to be Marco Rubio because Don Jr. doesn't like Marco Rubio, and he didn't announce him last night. But then I saw a cable news show today that said it's Burgum and JD Vance. Burgum the favorite. And so I think it's often the most recent talking head. Most of these talking heads, I don't even know who they are, right. But for some reason I listen to them as if they're gospel.
Well, they're on TV. They must be right.
Yeah. I always get kicked out of when I see Democratic pollster or Democrat media consultant, and I've never heard of these people. That's never a good sign that they're successful at doing their real job.
According to Republican strategists, and it's like they just have a Twitter account, as far as I can tell. Like I don't strategists. Like I don't. The other thing I always like, we do it a lot in local media where we always have we're always talking to like the political science professor, right? Like, like, well, according to the political science professor, and it's like, I mean, and then it's like Captain Obvious time, right? Like,
Well, I think the person who gets more votes on election day is going to be the winner. That's what
it reminds me of. It reminds me of when Carlos Beltran was in the Yankees booth calling Yankees games all the time, and he's like, well, he doesn't want to get one more strike because then he'll have 3 strikes and then he'll be out. Like. And your point about the double standard for if we're going to be doing sports ball analogies, your thing about like Donald Trump, it's kind of become like playing the Colorado Rockies, where they're terrible, right?
Yeah.
And so if you beat the Rockies, it's like, well, whatever, right? You're supposed to beat the Rockies. Everybody's supposed to beat the Rockies. They're terrible. But if you lose to the Rockies, well, that's a really big deal. You're not supposed to lose to the Rockies, even though they're a team of professional baseball players playing a 162-game season, and they can win some games too. They always win games too. Somebody's got to lose to them.
Yeah, you're going to win 50 to 62 games every year, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine a situation
where they don't. That's how it is with Trump. So it's like if Trump says something crazy, it's like, yeah, that's Trump.
Yeah.
But if you say something crazy, it's like, wait a minute, you're not crazy. Why are you saying that?
Yeah, you're running for president, for God's sakes. You're the president of the United States.
And it sucks. It's a terrible double standard. I'm not endorsing it, but that's what it is.
Right.
So I don't know. Did we decide? So people listening to this, our analysis on whether or not Doug Burgum is going to be the vice president has absolutely no predictive value because Chad and I don't know anything. And I think part of it too, I think Donald Trump is playing this like a game of apprentice. I think a lot of all over the place. A lot of these people maybe really are talking to Trump or talking to people adjacent to Trump. And I think on purpose, they're raising all sorts of different names and moving it back and forth because it's all about ratings, baby.
Well, and I heard a story last night that when he nominated Pence, that he told Pence, "You're my guy, I'm picking you." And then after that called Chris Christie and said, "I'm still considering you for this position." Then went on cable news and said, "I haven't made a decision yet." So Mike Pence is sitting back, wait, you just told me I'm the guy, but now you're doing all this other stuff. I'm firmly in Senator Hogue's camp, where I think it's one of 3 chance. And if Donald Trump calls me, I will give him the advice that I think he should pick Doug Burgum.
I think, yeah. I mean, if we have to have a President Trump, and it seems like that's the position Democrats have put us in because Joe Biden's not going anywhere. And I don't think Joe Biden can win. I mean, you look at where the polls are heading now. I don't think he has the capacity to reverse that trend. I think that snowball has started rolling down the hill, and nothing's going to stop it now.
A lot can change in 4 months, but I think I think this idea that people are going to be holding their breath every time Joe Biden leaves the White House is problematic. I mean, I don't know how you create momentum when there's always people on the edge of their seat saying, it's going to happen again.
Well, that was something I think I forwarded you a column from Nick Catoggio at the Dispatch. Where he made that point where it's like a constant hurricane watch where, we're all watching and we're all, okay, good, he made it through that event. But then it's like the hurricane watch starts for the next event. Right. And he's got to do.
Yeah, it's not a big motivator for people to knock on doors, make phone calls, write checks when you don't know when that next thing might happen.
I think if it's Joe Biden's in, and I think he is because he's the only one who could go. I mean, there's no other than the 25th Amendment, which nobody's going to use, where the cabinet can remove him. That's just not going to happen. He's not going. The only person who can leave the ticket. I mean, Joe Biden's the only one who can make that decision, so he's not going anywhere. So. I think what Democrats have to do from here on out is just make it all about Trump. And I mean, that's a tough sell where it's like, yeah, our guy's not great, but look at the alternative. Early on I said that this was a race to the bottom, and I hate how right that has been.
Yeah, I think it's become more of a race to the bottom than I even expected.
Yeah. It's
because really... I didn't want to believe that the age thing was going to play out the way it has, but I think one of the other things that I've been reading a lot is we all know 81-year-olds, right? And this is what happens with 81-year-olds. And so I think a lot of people are looking at him and saying, well, I remember my dad was this age or my grandma was this age. And they're like, they maybe weren't on the top of their game. Now, Donald Trump, from my perspective, has never been on the top of his game.
No.
But here we are.
Yeah, we are where we're at. All right, we're going to put a pin in it there. Hey, coming up on Friday, we're going to have Stephen Roderick on. He just wrote a lengthy profile about Governor Burgum running for the vice presidency. I think both Chad and I spent a lot of time talking to him about his story before he published.
Yeah, I thought our quotes in that story were great, Rob.
Yeah, neither of us were quoted, so we'll make sure to rake Stephen over the coals for that. No, Steve, he's a great guy. He's going to be on the show Friday. Until then, thank you so much for listening, and enjoy this beautiful summer that we're having. I think we're really having a good one in North Dakota. It's been nice.
Awesome. Yeah.
It really is. All right. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again.